Chapter 1126, Unexpected. After bringing the wood-colored cane back to the real world, Klein immediately began the ritual. He lit the candles and burned the corresponding essential oils and herbal powder, took 2 steps back, and skillfully recited the honorific name of the goddess. Finally, he said,
I sacrifice this cane filled with life to you. I'm willing to receive your blessings.
He didn't directly mention the demonic wolf of fog's transformed heart and white frost crystal. This was equivalent to making an equivalent exchange, not offering sacrificial items and praying for a bestowment. There was no need to be too meticulous in other aspects of the ritual, but this was a case of showing his attitude at a fundamental level. He felt that he needed to be careful, for a bestowment. When Klein finished his sentence, 2 out of the 3 candle flames swelled and intertwined, forming an illusory and dark, mysterious door. The door slowly opened, creating strong, invisible winds. They swept up the life's cane, allowing it to disappear into the seemingly endless cosmos through the gap of the illusory door. Immediately following that, there was a flash as 2 items tore through the barrier and landed on the altar without making a single sound. One of them was a strange heart formed by wisps of white mist, and the other was crystalline frost that emitted cold air. Klein was delighted as he hurriedly lowered his head to thank the goddess for her bestowment. When he raised his head again, the dark and mysterious door had closed. It rapidly faded away, and the altar was completely restored to normal. Phew, it really succeeded. Klein heaved a sigh of relief and took 2 steps forward, putting away the demonic wolf of fog's transformed heart and white frost crystal. At this moment, the relaxed him couldn't help but have a thought that he absolutely couldn't say out loud.
If I had known that it would go so smoothly, I wouldn't have had to use my life's cane. That huge junk pile might have been enough. Perhaps I didn't need to sacrifice anything, and the goddess would have bestowed them to me. The present situation indicates that she is personally supporting me becoming a scholar of yore. Of course, this way, if I receive too many bestowments, who knows what price I'll pay in the future. Using life's cane to trade for it makes me feel more at ease. Well, from the looks of it, before advancing to sequence 2 and becoming an angel, the goddess will still shower her blessings on me. In the future, it will be hard to tell what kind of developments and changes will happen.
With this in mind, he reined in his thoughts, ended the ritual, and tidied up the altar. Then he began to plan on how to deal with the hounds of Fulgrim, the so-called Sefirah castle keepers. A magician never performs unprepared. South of the bridge, Rose Street. Leonard changed into a black and white police uniform and wore a red glove. He led his team members and the real policeman to the only cathedral of the Church of Earth Mother in Backland. The epaulets he was wearing corresponded to a high-ranking inspector. But in fact, with his status as a captain of a Red Gloves team, he should be equivalent to a superintendent or even a chief superintendent. However, officers at that rank wouldn't involve themselves in such missions. Wearing those epaulets to the Harvest Church would easily arouse the suspicion of the public. After passing through the door, Leonard scanned the area and realized that it was empty. There were only 2 figures. One was sitting in the front pew, focused on praying. The second was the handsome man dressed in a priest's robes. He had black hair and red eyes, Emlyn white. Leonard nodded secretly as he walked down the aisle to Bishop Utrovsky. There. He then coughed twice, making the half-giant bishop open his eyes and look over. Yeah, I'm an inspector from the Backland Police Department. Leonard showed his identification and said,
We would like to invite you back to assist in our investigations.
Father Utrovsky stood up slowly and asked in a calm tone, despite looking down at him.
What's the matter?
The nearby residents reported your abnormal behavior, saying that it's possible that you're a spy for Fasak or Finepotter.
Leonard explained the reason he had long come up with. At the same time, he was prepared to pull Bishop Utrovsky into a dream at any moment. Once he resisted, he would try to control this blessed in the shortest time possible. Imbach. With the Red Gloves team's distribution, as long as they didn't directly encounter a true demigod, even if they were to face a blessed who was in charge of a holy artifact, they would have a good chance of taking down their opponent. Furthermore, before Leonard set off, he had applied for a Grade 1 sealed artifact. This was also the reason why he had delayed taking action until today. Father Utrovsky fell silent for 2 seconds before turning to look at Emlyn White, who was standing by the candlestand. Emlyn's slightly complicated expression froze. He opened his mouth but didn't know what to say. Father Utrovsky retracted his gaze and nodded slightly.
Okay.
So cooperative, I thought we would experience an intense battle and that we had to be very careful not to cause any casualties.
Leonard was taken aback before he smiled.
Thank you for your cooperation.
If there really was a battle that ended up harming a blessed of Earth Mother, Leonard suspected that the tense situation would rapidly be aggravated. Through the ancient history in Grozel's travels and the various secrets he learned from the Tarot Club and the corresponding explanations of Old Man Pelez, Leonard knew that the relationship between the Church of Earth Mother and the Church of Evernight was like dried timber. It could be ignited with a tiny spark. When the time came, the history books would record today's events. Massa Mundfreivgoreis. The war would go from a localized problem to a fuse that ignited the globe. Leonard Mitchell had lit a religious gunpowder keg. Phew. Seeing that Father Utrovsky didn't resist and accepted the protective custody, Emlyn White secretly heaved a sigh of relief. He was very satisfied with his performance at the Tarot Club. Read more chapter on our VIPnovel.com. At this moment, the Red Gloves team member, Cindy, looked at Emlyn, who lacked a level of masculinity due to the gentleness of the soft moonlight. She lowered her voice and said,
Cap, sir, there's still a priest? Should we take him with us? Yes. We can temporarily shut down the Harvest Church for some time to prevent any accidents from happening.
After a few seconds and repeated deliberation, Leonard finally said,
If the spy case involves Potter, he would also be considered a suspect. Let's invite him back to assist in our investigations.
Emlyn was stunned, unsure of what expression to show in response. Eastborough, in a 2-bedroom rental apartment. Forrest rubbed her dark eye circles and drank the last mouthful of bitter coffee. She stood up abruptly and began changing her clothes. Shio, who was enjoying her breakfast, was taken aback and said,
Done writing?
It had only been a day and a half. Forrest shook her head and took a deep breath.
No, but I've already written the first volume. I can hand it over to the editor of the publisher. If it's serialized, there's no need to finish it all now.
Shio thought and said,
This is indeed a good idea. It can effectively reduce your stress.
Forrest's expression twisted as she closed her eyes.
I hope so.
In another rental apartment a few streets away, after a series of tasks, Klein, who had come up with a plan and made his preparations, put on creeping hunger and quickly turned transparent as he entered the spirit world. Looking up, he saw the 7 pure lights that comprised of 7 different colors. He released the arms of his 2 marionettes and took out a box. He removed the wall of spirituality around it, allowing the aura of the demonic Wolf of Fog's transformed heart to emanate from it. Then, he pulled Enuni while Enuni pulled Konas. Together, the 3 of them rapidly teleported deep into the spirit world. Along the way, all kinds of strange spirit world creatures passed by them like oil paintings that depicted hell. After an unknown period of time, Klein's premonition for danger suddenly stirred as a scene quickly appeared in his mind. Red, black, white, blue, and other colors saturated and overlapped as a slender figure suddenly appeared. Psh! It looked like a hound. Its entire body was covered in black short fur, and its eye sockets were 2 balls of dark red burning flames. The ends of its mouth extended to the back of its head. It clearly existed there in its corporal form, but it gave off an illusory feeling that felt surreal. Hound of Fulgrim. Klein immediately turned around and faced it. He released his 2 marionettes at the same time, allowing them to wander in different directions. In the blink of an eye, the Hound of Fulgrim appeared. The 2 dark red flames, which weren't too deformed but were absolutely terrifying, turned and looked at Klein. Right on the heels of that, its figure became more and more illusory. It instantly disappeared, as though it was a projection from history. Salut, 4. As Klein muttered to himself in shock,
It ran away. Just like that.
he became even more wary of the possibility of a surprise attack. More than 10 seconds later, two figures phased into existence. They were covered in black fur, their eyes burning and the corners of their lips extended to the back of their heads. However, there was only one dark red flame left in the eye sockets of each of the two monsters. The remaining fireballs were in their paws. Without waiting for Klein to react, the two hounds of Fulgrim lay down in the void of the spirit world and wagged their tails. They wagged their tails. Klein's mouth was agape, wondering if he was dreaming. Chapter 1127, Sefirah Castle. Only after the two burning dark red fireballs floated over from the hounds of Fulgrim and landed in front of him did Klein snap back to his senses. He felt puzzled and relieved.
Why did they harm themselves to come up with a pair of eyes for me? There seems to be thick and sticky blood surrounding them. If this is their trap, I would have already stepped into it. To think that I fell into a daze for a few seconds. This is a fatal mistake for a bizarro sorcerer in battle. However, no matter who it is, it's inevitable that they will have similar reactions when encountering something like this the first time. The terrifying enemy who they had meticulously planned to deal with had ended up kneeling down, wagging their tails the moment they see them. This is like a dream. This performance is very similar to Eroda's. Could the great existence above the spirit world be able to showcase special traits in the spirit world?
As this thought flashed through his mind, he looked at the two dogs that were prostrating themselves in the void and wagging their tails. He stretched out his left hand and grabbed the two dark red flames and large amounts of thick, dark red blood. The moment he came into contact with these things, he suddenly heard familiar ravings and roars. They were sometimes shrill, sometimes dull, sometimes maniacal, sometimes seductive, sometimes crazy, and sometimes ethereal. Immediately following that, an illusory, grayish-white fog appeared in front of him. The fog spread out in all directions. Above them, there was a towering and majestic palace that looked like a god's residence. This was a very familiar scene, because every time he entered the mysterious space above the gray fog, he would pass through it. In the beginning, it was difficult for him to notice his surroundings after he took 4 steps counterclockwise. However, as he got used to it, and with the advancements of his sequence, he was able to easily take the opportunity to observe the phenomenon. And at that moment, Klein hadn't chanted the honorific name of celestial worthy of heaven and earth for blessings, or taken 4 steps counterclockwise. This made him extremely wary. Then, he saw a few figures appear in the endless gray fog. They overlapped with the gray fog at times while separating at other times. They were none other than hounds of Fulgrim, with their eyes burning with dark red flames, and their bodies covered in short black fur. The 2 hounds of Fulgrim that had lost one eye each returned to their companions, sighed and blended into the dark spots in the gray fog. The entire phenomenon vanished as well. In the depths of the spirit world, Klein realized that there were no longer any hounds of Fulgrim around him. Only his 2 marionettes and strange spirit world creatures remained. Klein lowered his head and looked at the eyeballs and blood in his hand. With their presence, he confirmed that what he had just experienced was not an illusion.
The Hounds of Fulgrim are also known as Sefirah Castle Keepers. They live in the historical void. I saw them active within the gray fog before fusing with the dark spots.
Combining what he had seen and heard, Klein gradually came to a bold conclusion.
Perhaps Sefirah Castle is referring to the mysterious space above the gray fog. It's referring to that strange door of light. As for the gray fog, it's a symbolic object formed from all the history in the spirit world. There are void gaps present in it. Every time I enter the mysterious space through the gray fog, I leave certain traces there, making the Hounds of Fulgrim no longer feel unfamiliar with me. They see me as the owner of Sefirah Castle, so when they saw me, they immediately offered me what I needed and shook their tails to gain my favor. After a day of planning, asking about the situation, and inviting helpers, I ended up targeting my own guards.
As he thought of this, he inexplicably felt a sense of absurdity at the situation. It felt like the fool above the gray fog was reaching out his hands to fleece someone, only to end up fleecing himself.
Phew. Sefirah Castle. Although this development makes me even more afraid, In any case, I still have some understanding of the owner of the gray fog in that mysterious space. The unknown is the most terrifying thing.
After standing silently in the depths of the spirit world for a moment, Klein slowly exhaled and summoned his 2 marionettes back. He planned on waiting for the Bizarro Sorcerer potion to be completely digested before attempting to seek out relevant knowledge about Sefirah Castle from Rhodes and other places. When the time came, if anything were to happen, he could use his advancement to fight it. East Borough in a 2-bedroom rental apartment. With her dark eye circles, Fours returned and retrieved the day's newspaper and letters in passing.
How was it?
Shio, who had just returned home for lunch, asked. Fours covered her mouth and yawned.
Not bad. The editor I know is very satisfied with my new book's topic and writing style. He decided to arrange for its serialization as soon as possible. You might not be aware, but the horror stories of Backland's hospitals have been very popular recently. A best-selling author had gained inspiration from it and is beginning to serialize similar stories. I'm actually not the first to do so.
This is a good thing.
Zio thought about it and nodded seriously. This meant that Fours, who had also written the horror stories of Backland's hospitals, wouldn't attract too much attention. Her new pen name wouldn't be tested either.
I know.
Fours threw the newspaper aside and took out a few letters that were stuffed in it before quickly flipping through them. Soon, she found the reply letter from her teacher, Dorian Gray Abraham. Fours' expression immediately turned solemn as she quickly tore open the envelope. She spread open the letter and began reading.
Benjamin Abraham is from Intis. He lived in Roselle's era. Apart from mysticism knowledge and a small amount of inheritance, he didn't leave anything of value behind. Later on, everything was destroyed by the Aurora Order. I'm unable to provide the corresponding information. Mr. Gehrman Sparrow is about to be disappointed.
Fours pursed her lips and pulled off a magic trick, burning the letter in her hand to ashes. Then she began writing a reply, asking her teacher if she knew of the secret ruins of Blood Emperor Alista Tudor. Klein went above the gray fog and listened to Miss Magician's prayers.
The trail of clues for Benjamin Abraham have come to an end. It's all the fault of those lunatics from the Aurora Order.
At the same time, he learned of the serialization of the horror stories of Backland's hospitals. After returning to the real world, and just as he was about to head out for a meal, he suddenly saw Miss Messenger walk out of the void with 4 heads in her hand. One of them had a letter in its mouth.
Who sent it?
Asked Klein in puzzlement. Renette Tinneker's remaining 3 heads replied,
A. Seduced. Idiot.
Who is that?
Klein grew confused as he took the letter and opened it.
The mastermind behind those matters is George III. His goal is to become the Black Emperor. Are you interested in stopping this matter? Trissy, this demoness actually dares to write me a letter. Isn't she afraid of being caught by Miss Messenger on the spot? Oh right, Miss Messenger just said that the sender was a seduced idiot. Trissy seduced a man and got him to help her summon the messenger while she hid far away and waited for the other party to contact her through a mirror. She's pretty smart. She really is very persistent in investigating this matter. Isn't she afraid that she'll be killed by either me or George III? She ceases. That man should be a beyonder. It would be quite difficult for an ordinary person to hold a summoning ritual. After all, it relies on one's spirit and spirituality.
Klein was first puzzled before he came to a realization. Immediately following that, he began to wonder why Trissy managed to guess that George III wanted to become the Black Emperor. Without sufficient mysticism, knowledge, and without knowing the Black Emperor's apotheosis ritual or the corresponding history, even a demigod would find it difficult to guess. It definitely wasn't as easy as the Red Angel evil spirit had said. Could it be that Trissy has other helpers? Or could it be that she has obtained more power from the primordial demoness, including all sorts of knowledge and secrets? Klein frowned slightly, as he felt that there was something amiss. If there was a chance, he would definitely get rid of demoness Trissy. After thinking for more than 10 seconds, he took out a piece of paper and pen from his pocket and scribbled a reply. I'm interested, but I don't know what you want to do. In the Backland Bridge area, a man in his 30s looked in horror as the headless woman. No, the four-headed demoness reappeared before him and dropped the letter.
Are all the messengers in the mysterious world so terrifying?
Only about 5 minutes after Renette Tyneker left did the man catch his breath. He picked up the letter and opened it to take a look. During this process, his gaze gradually burned because it meant that he could meet that beautiful woman again. According to her instructions, he waited until the evening before he took out the black, sticky lump. He separated them and applied them evenly onto a mirror. A few seconds later, the mirror turned dark, as if it was connected to another world. In the blink of an eye, the mirror presented a room that was completely different from the present environment. There was a young girl dressed in a dark black dress. She was none other than Demoness Trissy. The man who finished the ritual immediately revealed an infatuated expression as he subconsciously whispered.
The reply said that he is interested.
The light dimples on the sides of Trissy's cheeks slowly bloomed, making the mirror appear brighter. Her eyebrows relaxed as she said,
I'll send you a letter. Forward it to Gehrman Sparrow. You absolutely cannot read its contents.
After obtaining the man's unhesitant promise, Trissy stretched out her right hand and swiped it across the mirror, causing the dark, aqueous light to disappear. She immediately found pen and paper and deliberated for a few seconds before quickly writing. The secret mausoleums needed for the Georgios ritual should be from Blood Emperor Alista Tudor, and there is an existence who understands it very well. It might be able to help us successfully infiltrate and cause damage during the ritual. I have a way to contact that existence, but we have to wait until the next full moon. What you need to do is provide me with some blood, hair, flesh, or bones from a descendant of the Abraham family. Trissy. Chapter 1128. Finally, an outcome. East Borough, in a 2-bedroom rental apartment. After receiving the reply from Demoness Trissy from Miss Messenger Renette Tyneker, he pulled a chair to sit down and began reading.
This means she knows of Mr. Dorr's existence, and she has a way to use the bloodline of the Abraham family to communicate with that entity. Trissy can already withstand Mr. Dorr's cry for help. Isn't she afraid of losing control because of this? Besides, she seems to be very sure of Mr. Dorr's identity. She really has obtained more knowledge and secrets from the primordial demoness. But in such a situation, why would the demoness of White Katerina be pursuing her?
Questions arose in Katerina's mind as he read the short letter. As Trissy's vague mention of the matter was within his understanding, he believed that she wasn't lying in this aspect. Furthermore, she had provided a very feasible solution. Of course, the prerequisite for this method to succeed was to obtain the correct ritual and have a descendant of the Abraham family be willing to take a huge risk, as they used something related to their bloodline as a medium. Of these 3 points, he was missing the first point. He still had some doubts about the third point. He attempted to find a safer and more concealed method, but Demoness Trissy seemed to only lack the second point.
To me, it's easy to find the descendants of the Abraham family. I can directly contact them through Miss Magician. However, once I hand over their hair, blood, flesh, and bones to Demoness Trissy, this will put them at risk of being hexed.
Klein understood the demoness pathway rather well, and knew that they were very good at hexes. Gehrman. As his thoughts raced, he gradually came up with a countermeasure. It was to use the hair, flesh, or bones of the deceased. He remembered that Miss Magician had mentioned to the fool that she had once buried an old man named Lawrence. He was undoubtedly a descendant of the Abraham family.
I hope it wasn't a cremation. Although this is somewhat sacrilegious to a corpse, speaking to Mr. Dorr is a necessary procedure to dispel the Abraham family's ancient curse. It's better to use the dead rather than implicate the living. When the time comes, I'll add this in Trissy's reply. I'll claim that this is a requirement stipulated by the descendant of the Abraham family for the ritual's medium. Also, I have to first confirm that Trissy is going to speak to Mr. Dorr and not attempt to pull him back to the real world. They are either of a high level or are involved in high-level situations. It will be difficult to obtain any effective revelations using divination, but Emperor Roselle said that the ritual required to facilitate Mr. Dorr's return is very complicated. It definitely can't be set up by a small number of descendants. I can get Queen Mystic and Miss Sharon to monitor Backland's underground market and see if there are any abnormal trades of materials and personnel.
Klein nodded slightly and decided to find Miss Magician in a while. he could also rush her writing, North Borough, Phelps Street. On a bench, a young man in a black trench coat and silk top hat was sitting there with a thin face and a broad forehead. He looked at the withered and yellow intis parasol trees in a daze. He wore a crystal-carved monocle on his right eye, looking rather refined. At that moment, an elder who was heading to St. Samuel Cathedral stopped in his tracks when he saw that something was amiss. He asked gently,
"Young man, what are you worried about? You lost something in this war?"
He suspected that the young man's relatives, lover, or friends had died in the air raid or during intense battles at the front lines. That was why he was sitting alone by the side of the street, looking lost. The young man raised his hand and pinched his monocle. He sighed and shook his head.
"I'm just thinking about some rather complicated questions."
The old man, male, was taken aback as he blurted out,
"Are you a philosopher?"
The young man, male, smiled calmly as he continued to ponder. From time to time, he would purse his lips and whisper silently,
"No, but I often bring up philosophical problems for others, just like who I am, where I am, and what's my future."
The elder, male, couldn't understand him and could only shake his head. Under the gaze of the stray dogs, sparrows, ants, and microbes in the air, he slowly left. The young man, male, didn't turn his head. His monocle reflected yellow leaves that were floating down as he muttered to himself.
To parasite, to not parasite, to parasite, to not parasite. See the bait, devour the bait. See the bait, devour the bait.
After getting the hair from Lawrence's remains from Fours and seeing the horror stories of Backland hospitals being serialized in the Tussock Times, Klein entered a patient state. He also promised to send Miss Magician to a new place next week to record new sights and customs. Soon, a new week had arrived. After having his lunch, he planned to take a short nap to prepare for the 3 o'clock tarot gathering. At this moment, Renette Tinneker, female, who was holding 4 blonde, red-eyed heads, walked out from the depths of the void. One of them had a linen bag in its mouth.
Who sent it?
Klein suddenly had an inexplicable feeling. He had a complicated premonition as he didn't immediately reach out to receive the bag Miss Messenger was holding. Renette Tinneker's female, 3 free heads spoke one after another.
The Psi. Real. Mutated. King. Avorial. Mushrooms.
This string of words. I roughly understand what's going on.
Klein controlled his expression of not baring his teeth as he slowly took the bag. When he opened the bag, he wasn't surprised to see copious amounts of demons. No, mushrooms. Some of them were white and full, as though they would spurt out milk with a single poke. Some of them were black at the bottom and were embedded with thin, blood-colored lines and markings. Some of them were covered in golden stars, and the mushroom cap was as large as a palm. At that moment, the mushrooms were still squirming slightly as though they wanted to spread their hyphae and spores. After swallowing his saliva, he picked up a letter that was surrounded by mushrooms, and he started reading,
My dear friend, Gehrman, I've finally completed your request. I've invented mushrooms that can be planted in dark and harsh environments. They can grow by devouring the flesh and blood of monsters without any other conditions. Their descendants will be divided into 2 categories. The first type will accumulate various kinds of poisons that cannot be eaten. However, they can be used as a source of poison. The other type can be used for food after being cooked at high temperatures through boiling, stewing, and frying. You must remember not to eat it raw or before it's cooked. Otherwise, they will proliferate in your body, using your flesh and blood as a hotbed. In consideration of having a variety of flavors, I've invented 11 kinds of mushrooms. Some are rich in milk. This can be directly drunk. Some are like beef. Heh. When frying them, there's no need to provide any extra oil. Some are as delicate as fish meat but without the bones. My suggestion is to roast or boil it. All of these wouldn't have been possible without your help. If I hadn't already advanced and become a druid, I might have taken a few years, or even more than a decade, to resolve all the problems I encountered during the experimentation process. If you have any other ideas that are suitable for me, please share them with me. Your friend forever, Frank Lee.
With the letter in hand, Klein fell silent for a long time. He looked up and realized that Miss Messenger, female, was still waiting. He sighed silently and walked to the desk. He took out a piece of paper and a pen and slowly wrote.
I'm very happy that you've succeeded. These mushrooms will help me greatly. They will effectively reduce famine in certain areas. I'm currently busy with some matters, so I don't have any new ideas for now. Your friend, Gehrman Sparrow.
After folding the letter, he looked at Miss Messenger, female, and hesitantly asked,
How's Frankly's condition like now?
The head that Renette Tinneker, female, had previously failed to say anything spoke first.
Excited.
The other three added,
Animated. Happy. Satisfied.
Following that, the four heads said,
No longer afraid of being buried in soil.
Klein subconsciously asked.
Why?
The four blonde, red-eyed heads in Renette Tinneker's female. Hands spat out word by word.
He can extract the soil's nutrients and oxygen.
Frank has really evolved quite a bit after becoming a druid.
For a moment, Klein wasn't sure if he should be happy for his friend, or if he should grieve for the crew of the future. As he watched Miss Messenger, female, leave, Klein forced himself to sleep through cogitation. Then, he woke up at 2:30 p.m. to prepare for this week's tarot gathering. At 3 o'clock, dark red beams of light rose up from the ancient palace above the gray fog and solidified into their corresponding figures. Audrey, female, immediately stood up, curtsied, and bowed towards the end of the long bronze table.
Good afternoon, Mr. Fool.
As a senior psychiatrist, she had great control over her emotions. Furthermore, she hadn't encountered any problems this week. She was mainly seeking out donations, contacting pharmaceutical factories, and organizing medical volunteers. However, compared to the past, the cheerfulness and happiness she had when making her greeting had decreased significantly. The Fool Klein nodded slightly in response to the greetings from the members of the Tarot Club. Following that, he cast his gaze at the Hermit. He still owed this lady 8 questions. Cattleya, female, bowed her head and said with an unfaultable attitude,
Honorable Mr. Fool, there are still 2 questions this time.
After obtaining approval, she continued.
The first question is, what is the state of the devils in the abyss?
The Fool Klein muttered to himself inwardly.
Queen Mystic's first suspicion is that the Emperor's mausoleum is hidden in the abyss. This is identical to the Emperor's train of thought. She is indeed his biological daughter. Unfortunately, there are no citizens that can be controlled there.
As he answered with an unchanging expression,
The current abyss is a place most devils are unable to live in.
Chapter 1129, Pressure. The current abyss is a place most devils are unable to live in. Upon hearing Mr. Fool's reply, Cattleya and company inevitably felt a deep sense of shock. In mysticism, the abyss was considered by all to be the most corrupted and most disorderly place. It was where the devils lived. But now, most of the natives were unable to survive in there. Is the environment in the abyss worsening, causing the devils to be unable to adapt to it, or is it because the situation regarding the corruption, chaos, and degeneration has improved, making the abyss no longer suitable for the devils to live in? Alger quickly had 2 theories, but he didn't know which one it was. The hermit Cattleya shared the same thoughts as him, but she was even more puzzled as to why the queen would ask such a question. Regarding Mr. Fool's answer, it seemed to have a deeper meaning to it, one that could help the queen in understanding whatever agenda she had and its secrets. As for justice, she suddenly thought of the Church of Knowledge's prophet demigod. He had once said that the end of the world would arrive in 1368 of the 5th epoch. This was publicly acknowledged by all Beyonders who were good at making prophecies. Even the deities had agreed with it.
It's 1350 this year. We're only 18 years from the apocalypse.
Hence, there are signs of the abyss appearing. The chaotic and degenerate environment that is originally filled with abstract meanings has broken past its limits, becoming even worse. Audrey had a rough idea of the situation, and this added to her slight anxiety and unease. As there weren't any signs of the apocalypse in the beginning, she didn't put much weight on the matter. She usually paid more attention to the current wars, casualties, and the victims of suffering. But now, the anomaly within the abyss had left her inexplicably horrified. She desperately wanted to improve herself. She wanted to finish digesting the potion and obtain the Beyonder characteristic left behind by Havan Rhombus to advance to become a demigod. Only then could she have the ability to interfere and resist certain things that she didn't want to see happen.
Mr. World, entrust me with more tasks.
Audrey silently prayed in her heart and secretly placated her restless emotions. The members such as Leonard, Fors, and Gio actually had some doubts about whether the abyss really existed. This was because, after the Second Epoch, the abyss had never revealed itself to the world again. The most active devils in the real world had come from the Blood Sanctify sect. Even the high-level devils and evil existences that the rituals pointed to were highly likely to be the highest echelons of the Blood Sanctify sect. Of course, the evil god, the dark side of the universe, was widely regarded as the embodiment of the abyss, but his presence was extremely low. If he hadn't occasionally responded to the ritual and showed the characteristics of the devil, he would probably be considered a pure legend, just like giant King Ormir. But even so, the secrets of the Church of Evernight that Leonard could come into contact with had also shown that it was possible that the dark side of the universe was a disguise used by other evil gods and hidden existences. This wasn't surprising to Derek. In certain places, some distance away from the City of Silver, deep in the endless darkness, there were many devils that were unable to maintain their calm states. There was no lack of demigods like the demons that weren't too different from the abyss. If not for the fact that the giant King's Court and other iconic items existed, the City of Silver citizens would definitely have suspected that the truth behind them being abandoned was that they had been thrown into the abyss. As the thoughts flashed through the members' minds, Cattleya restrained her doubts and continued asking,
Honorable Mr. Fool, the second question is, did the things that Emperor Roselle do in his later years have any external, unnecessary influence?
This question reminded Klein of the shocking details in Roselle's later diary entries. Immediately he sighed. With the posture of the fool, he slowly shook his head.
No, those things were what the Emperor wanted to do.
Just as Cattleya felt an uncontrollable sense of disappointment and sadness when she heard Mr. Fool smile with a sigh.
It wasn't due to an external influence or influencer, but due to corruption. It's very difficult to detect, even for him.
Corruption. Emperor Roselle was corrupted in his later years. At that time, he was already a grounded angel. How could he be corrupted? Is this from a particular true god, or the underground corruption that even the ancient gods feared?
Amidst the shock, Audrey came up with a guess based on the secrets she knew. Algier and the other members of the Tarot Club also didn't expect such a thing to happen to Emperor Roselle in his later years. They began to suspect his purpose behind him, creating the cards of blasphemy. At the same time, they believed that Mr. Fool's search of the cards of blasphemy might contain deeper motives, much more than what they had originally deduced.
In this game that involves the entire world, only important figures like Mr. Fool have the right to become a player, and we are only a card or some chips. The Kings of Angels and Sequence 1 Angels might be qualified to participate.
Algier sighed as he had the desire to become a player.
The story of the Emperor's later years went from being a tyrant to an evil god. A book that starts off with romance, motivation, passion, love, adventure, and even the decadent lifestyle of Inta's high society later turns into a horror story. I wouldn't even dare write something like that. If it were me writing it, I would make the Emperor's final tragic end stem from a betrayal in one's love, a marriage betrayal, or betraying an oath.
Forrest couldn't help but let her thoughts go wild. She even had the urge to start writing a set of chronicles for Emperor Roselle. Of course, there were quite a number of Roselle's chronicles on the market. Some of them were even prohibited items.
Corrupted, so it's because of corruption.
Cathalia sighed and felt sorrowful. She sighed with emotion. In the end, the emperor didn't end up like the story of the dragon-slaying warrior he had spoken of. From being a hero, he turned into an evil dragon. He was still a legend worthy of worship, but the sad thing was that, up to today, this misunderstanding was finally beginning to be resolved. After her emotions settled down, Cathalia recalled the matter of being corrupted. The more she thought about it, the more horrified she became. She believed that she was one of the members of the Tarot Club who knew Roselle the best. She knew very well what height this emperor had reached in his later years. Of course, Mr. Fool was the convener, a witness, and not a member. However, a Sequence 1 angel such as him, someone who made the throne of divinity a target, had been silently corrupted. He and the people around him didn't notice it at all.
This is much more terrifying than it is horrific.
Cathalia secretly took a deep breath before slowly exhaling to regulate her emotions. Then, she bowed towards the end of the long, mottled table.
Thank you for your answer, Honorable Mr. Fool.
I'm also thankful that you didn't ask anything beyond my means.
The fool Klein gave a self-deprecating laugh as he leaned back into his chair and nodded slightly.
You may begin.
Just like the previous gathering, the members of the Tarot Club had either just advanced or were still digesting. They didn't have any trades to do, and they didn't need anything for the time being. After exchanging a few looks, they decided to directly enter the free exchange segment. Of course, Emlyn was a special exception. He really wanted to make a request to get someone to start a jailbreak to free him from the basement of St. Samuel Cathedral. Yes, to this day, he was still under protective custody behind Channis Gate at the Backlund headquarters of the Church of Evernight. In his neighboring cell was Bishop Utravsky, and during this period of time, no Nighthawk had come to interrogate him. If not for the people in charge of guarding the sealed area, bringing them water and food every day, Emlyn definitely would have believed that he and Father Utravsky had already been forgotten.
The dark, silent environment is still all right, but it's just a little cold. But without dolls, newspapers, books, and historical documents, this life is meaningless. Besides, the Nighthawks provide me with cow blood, and it tastes nasty. The effects aren't too good either. I'm already becoming weak.
Emlyn opened his mouth, but he didn't say a word because he felt that this was a very embarrassing matter. After all, he was the one who asked the star and had pushed for protective custody. Yet he ended up also being brought into protective custody.
I hope that fellow hasn't forgotten me and is thinking of a way to get me out.
Emlyn glanced at the star, Leonard, and maintained his silence. Leonard maintained his posture and didn't respond to the moon's gaze. There was nothing he could do for the time being. This was because he was the one who had raised the term protective custody in front of the Archbishop. As for Emlyn White, he was a vampire viscount, equivalent to a Sequence 5 Beyonder. He was a mobile humanoid bomb that also believed in the Earth Mother. There was no reason for him to be released immediately.
I can only wait for the Sanguine to protest through other channels before I have the authority to handle this matter.
The star Leonard decided to apply for a private exchange later and get Emlyn to think of a way to get the upper echelons of the Sanguine to contact the Church of Evernight. Their interaction had been noticed by Justice. She immediately thought of the question Mr. Moon had asked her last time. She suspected that something had gone wrong during the protective custody operation, but it didn't seem too serious.
I heard that the priest of the Harvest Church saved quite a number of people during the Great Smog of Backlund. I hope nothing bad happens.
Audrey nodded slightly and cast her gaze at Little Sun. The other members of the Tarot Club also cast their gaze towards the Sun Derrick. They knew that the City of Silver had planned on exploring the Giant King's Court last week, so it was likely that the results were out. The Sun Derrick sat up straight and glanced at Mr. Hanged Man before saying in a very natural manner,
We've completed our first exploration of the Giant King's Court. 3 dead, 1 missing, 5 survivors. We first arrived at the front door of the King's Court and saw 2 silver knights in an unknown state standing guard there. This is the name of the Giant Pathways, Sequence 3.
Chapter 1130, New Storm. 2 Sequence 3 demigods were guarding the main door, as expected of the Giant King's Court. The divine kingdom of an ancient god. The members of the Tarot Club suddenly felt a similar feeling. As for the son Derek, he didn't pause as he continued his recount. To him, he was shocked when he first discovered the two silver knights guarding the main door of the Giant King's court. However, the series of events that followed made it seem extremely ordinary, making it difficult to stir up his emotions.
According to what Mr. World shared, we followed a rather hidden path to the back of the Giant King's court. The monsters we encountered were mainly wraiths. They were restrained by the unshadowed crucifix. After we arrived at the Waning Forest, we tried to explore it, and we discovered that the remnants of the Giant King's will and the Divine Kingdom's powers had formed an evil spirit. It was protecting its parents' mausoleum.
Derek skillfully recalled his experiences during the expedition, and the members of the Tarot Club, Audrey, Alger, and the others, quickly reined in their thoughts of the Silver Knight Guards and listened attentively. They were all very interested in the secret hidden in the Waning Forest. They wanted to know what the ancient god, the Giant King, had tried to keep from his queen and child. Thinking back to the scene he had seen, Derek paused for a moment before saying,
After purging that evil spirit, we came to the mausoleum of the Giant King's parents. There was a stone still erected there, indicating the identity of the tomb's owner. As for the tomb and coffin, it had long been opened by someone, revealing the corpses inside. They were the corpses of two humans.
Corpses of humans? The tomb of the Giant King's parents had corpses of humans buried in it? Godfather and godmother? No, there wasn't any religion back then.
As a demigod who knew plenty of mysteries, the hermit Cataleya's first reaction was that the two corpses had another identity. Immediately following that, she recalled what the queen had mentioned. It was a question that Emperor Roselle had asked as though he had been talking to himself when he was alive.
Why did the ancient documents and historical records refer to giants, elves, vampires as humanoid creatures or anthropoid creatures? Why didn't they refer humans as giant-like, elf-like, or vampire-like creatures? Could it be that all humanoid creatures had descended from humans? The giants, elves, and vampires were the mutations brought by the Beyonder characteristics that could eventually become inherited?
Cataleya instantly calmed her emotions as she seriously considered the possible reasons. At this moment, she felt that her potion would be digested to a certain degree once she returned to the real world. This was because the sequence 4 of the Mystery Prior pathway was called Mysticologist, and the origins of the giants and humanoid creatures were, without a doubt, of extremely great value. They were mysticism knowledge that most ordinary demigods had no way of knowing.
The Giant King's parents were humans? That must be fake.
Alger immediately suspected that someone had fabricated the scene.
However, on second thought, this act not only required the real remains to be taken away and replaced with human remains, but one had to prepare a suitable coffin to make the tomb look like it didn't belong to a giant. Furthermore, fabricating it was pointless and wouldn't affect reality too much. No one would be so bored as to do something like that. To be able to enter the Giant King's court and suppress a powerful evil spirit, the person that approached the two graves was at least a saint, meaning that they had long passed the age of pulling pranks. Could it be that the ancestors of all creatures were humans? This includes the elves?
As he had seen too many shocking things at the Tarot Club, as well as suffer a religious breakdown from the mural on that primitive island, Alger didn't have overly intense emotions run through him. He just couldn't help but raise his hand and touch his dark blue hair.
Mr. Hanged Man connected himself to this matter. The Giant King's parents are actually humans. From the looks of it, most of the creation myths are fake. They were all fabricated by future generations. However, there are also hidden meanings in them. Mr. Moon seems to find it unacceptable. Mr. World seems to have known about it long ago.
With the help of placate and other psychological techniques, Audrey was able to compose herself the fastest, and she instinctively observed the reactions of the other members. At that moment, Emlyn was the most restless. His mind was filled with thoughts of impossible, and it's impossible.
If the original ancestor of giants were human, then what about the Sanguine? Could it be that we were just monsters that had mutated because of Beyonder characteristics? Impossible. We were clearly created by the ancestor. She has the authority of life and creation. It's completely different from the barbaric deities like the Giant King and Elf King, who only knew how to fight.
As Emlyn's thoughts churned, he felt a baffling feeling that his pride was cracking apart. His intuition, his rationality, and brain told him that the Sunderic didn't have any reason to lie about this matter. The possibility of other existences fabricating the scene was also very low. Hence, he subconsciously expelled the giant and elves from the ranks of humanoid creatures, and he viewed them as a branch of humanity. Leonard, Fors, and Gio quickly accepted the possibility that the sun revealed. To them, regardless of whether the giant ancestor was giant or human, or even a curly-haired baboon, it was no big deal. At most, it just meant that many supernatural creatures were a result of beyonder characteristics in the bodies of ordinary creatures, but this didn't cause any meaningful changes to their concept of reality. The Sunderic calmed himself down and continued in this strange silence.
After leaving the waiting forest, we entered the Giant King's court through the barren tunnel. On the way, there were remnant powers of corruption and concealment. We had to make the correct response in order to pass. That palace contains a mural that possesses powers related to the cycle of fate. As such, we were affected and transformed into the people who participated in a gathering. We repeated a very short process, and this process was the establishment of Rose Redemption.
At this point, Derek looked around and saw that all the members had temporarily jolted out of their previous states. They were extremely interested in the organization called Rose Redemption. They all knew that this was an extremely secretive and ancient organization that followed and believed in the true creator. It was the origins of the Aurora Order, and its members were kings of angels like Ouroboros, Medici, and Sasrir. Derek retracted his gaze and exhaled silently.
The two people who convened the Rose Redemption are Dark Angel Sasrir and Evernight Goddess Amanasis.
Ah, Audrey, Leonard, and Zio began to doubt their ears. They were all believers of Evernight. They never expected that the goddess would be a member of Rose Redemption and even be one of its conveners. This was akin to saying that the Evernight goddess was a member of the Tarot Club. If not for the fact that they knew what kind of person Little Sun was, knowing that he wouldn't lie, they definitely would have suspected the truth of this matter. But now, they were left temporarily speechless. They didn't even dare to think too deeply about it. Alger subconsciously turned his body to look at the sun, listening to his slow and heavy tone.
The participants included White Angel Occuses, Wind Angel Leodero.
Alger's eyelids twitched. He didn't even dare think.
God of Combat Badheal, Earth Mother Omabella.
Emlyn, who was leaning against the back of the chair, unknowingly sat up straight. There was only one message echoing in his mind. The goddess of harvest, Giant Queen Omabella.
God of the Dead Salinger, God of spiritual creatures, Tolsna.
The Sunderic's voice echoed in the ancient and magnificent palace. It made Cattleya, Fors, and the other members exchange looks. No one dared to say a word. It was as though they would suffer from divine punishment if they learned any deeper. After Derek finished speaking, they remained silent. The scene was strangely quiet. Finally, Cattleya sighed and said,
Rose Redemption truly is powerful and terrifying. Before this, I couldn't even imagine that those existences were members.
Just as she said that, the World Garamond Sparrow said with a deep, hoarse voice,
That was an organization formed to resist the ancient sun god. Later on, only a few kings of angels remained.
Upon hearing their conversation, it was as if Audrey and the other members had just snapped out of their dreams. All of them subconsciously cast their gaze to the end of the long, mottled table, at the figure shrouded in gray fog. It was as though they were waiting for the ruling of the entity of authority there. The fool Klein, who had long expected such a scene, didn't respond directly. He nodded slightly and sighed.
The fallen creator was born because of this.
It's real. It's real. The Rose Redemption, which Mr. Fool hinted back then, actually has such a deeper meaning. What is his identity in ancient times, and what position does he take in this matter? All these thoughts instantly formed a storm that swept through the minds of the Tarot Club members. Derek looked at everyone, and seeing that no one was speaking, he could only talk about the subsequent exploration.
We met the leader of the King's Court's chasers outside the palace, Lightcolor Muskogan. He said that Dark Angel Sazrir was in a state of slumber in that palace.
Compared to the matter regarding Rose redemption, news of the mysterious Dark Angel currently in slumber inside the Giant King's palace didn't stir up the emotions of Leonard, Emlyn, and the other members of the Tarot Club much. Only some of their curiosities had been satisfied. Of course, as a mysticologist, Catalea only hoped that the sun could speak a little more.
After that, we returned. Mr. Fool has bestowed us with the formula for the Silver Knight potion.
Towards the end of his explanation, Derek concluded honestly. Audrey and the others were still deep in thought over what had just happened. There was still a fear of being blasphemous, and no one responded. Only Alger thought for a moment and said,
"Since the birth of the true creator originated from Rose redemption, then he isn't unfamiliar with what happened to the Giant King's Court. Why is it that Shepherd Elder Lovia was completely unprepared for this?"